we begin with fashion expert and co-host of The Real, Jeannie Mai. She is with a comedian and actress who makes every room that she's in a little brighter. Margaret Cho.
Margaret, a legend in comedy, and I feel, especially in the Asian American world, you are a big sister to all of us. How are you doing amidst all of the heaviness that's surrounding the world right now, with all the pain that the world is feeling surrounding racism right now?
It's such an upsetting time, and I think that it's one of those things where you think that it couldn't possibly get any worse, and it actually has. And one of the things that I keep trying to go back to is at least we have some sense of accountability. You know, we have people out there with their phones that can actually record what's happening and report back. And so we have a resource that we didn't have in the same way that we didn't necessarily have in 2014. We have more people out there who are our eyes and ears on the street, which is an amazing thing. It's an amazing resource. And, you know, that racial violence is something that we've dealt with as a nation since the birth of this nation. And it's something that we have to eradicate. And it's gotten worse and worse. And it's just, I think, it's something that has to go away. It has to go away. And it's such a heartbreaking thing. But it has to come to an end. And I want to see the end of it. And I want to see it soon. I want to see it now. Yeah,
I hear you. And the sad reality I feel is that we're not even close to the end. It's just the beginning, because we are now realizing that far beyond Jim Crow law days to the whole historic time of why Black Americans were brought as slaves here to America, we're realizing that this has been the same state. This has been the same conditions ever since, and we have just looked the other way. And I mean, all of my non-Black friends out there, and especially our Caucasian allies, this is an important time for, as Rihanna said, for us to pull up. And by that, what does it mean? How are you acknowledging your privilege, and what are you doing specifically to use your privilege for good? And how do you feel? I know during this time of the pandemic, Margaret, and being so passionate about this, how in your own circle do you feel you can do something when we really don't know what we can do?
Well, this is the time to speak up. I mean, these are the times. This is what privilege is for. This is what fame is for. This is what having a platform is all about, is to use this format to talk about what you need to talk about. I mean, this is like, this is all of the reason why all of this is important. And so I think this is the moment, and this is the moment where we can really talk about why this is important and why we have to have the society has to change. And I think this is it. I'm so sick of what's happening, and I know that everybody wants things to change, and it has to. And I believe that we can change. And I think that it's just like this shift that has to happen. And we can do this, and we will do this.
Yes, absolutely. We have to do it together. I know that you and I both spoke out on the anti-Asian racism that took place during COVID-19. And it's a really unique time where we're not only aware of the existing racism that's out there, the specific racism towards Asian Americans, and then the racism we're seeing towards our brothers and sisters of the Black community. How do you feel us as Asian Americans should be allying and should be supportive and to fight this greater fight that our Black friends are dealing with?
Well, it's all part of the same struggle. It's all part of these assumptions that are based on ideas that are based on baseless assumptions. It's just all of these ideas that don't have any basis in truth. Right. There are all of these assumptions based on rumors, based on ideas, based on nothing fear. That's real. Yeah. It's just these rumors that are not really based on real relationships, that are based on truth. It's really about going and creating those relationships, going and finding out for real. Yeah. And, historically, we have always banded together in times of hardship. In our activism, we've been successful when we've banded together. And that's what we really need to do, is band together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I find that this is a very crucial time to do the one thing that perhaps we haven't done enough, which is to listen, to really lean back and listen. And not just to our friends of the of outside races, you know, to go out there and to actually check in our Black friends, check in our Black communities, and open up the conversation around the dinner table. Especially if our family members or our friends that we're quarantining with aren't Black, we should be talking about George Floyd. His name should be brought up as well as Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery. And then we should also be sitting back and listening to ourselves, listening to our thoughts, even if they're uncomfortable, even if they're afraid. Mm-hmm. These are thoughts that we need to play out and we need to hear and we need to exercise with other people, because we can turn these thoughts into actions in the right way as long as we are educating ourselves, we are empathizing with others, and we're feeling what these emotions are. Because I think the danger is when you don't feel something, right? Where you can actually scroll on the gram, see another breaking news about another building being burned down or another innocent man being shot. And then you just scroll on, shaking your head like, this is too much. No, it is too much, which is why you need to lean in.
I know. I think unfortunately, that's our parents' generation who it was too much for them. It was because they're bringing their customs of their country, which was like, that's not our problem. We have our own fish to fry, which is that's a very Asian stereotype. But but they did have their own fish to fry and gut, and you know how they do. Yeah. So, but they were like very concerned with their own problems. But we've been here for a while, so we can afford to deal with these now. These are our problems now too, and so we need to lean in. We need to take that on and realize we cannot shut it down. We cannot turn away. We cannot look the other way, because we've done that for a generation, and we can't afford to. So Absolutely. It really is about feeling it and asking and not being afraid to ask.
Absolutely.
You know? That's the main thing. And I think that's also like the problem of, white people are mostly afraid to ask because they don't want to look like
offend or
feel like, oh, well, I'm not down because I got to ask. You have to ask because you're not Black. You have to ask.
Point blank.
You're not part of that community, you have to ask, and that's not a shameful thing. We have to ask if we're not them. You're not them, ask. I appreciate it when people ask me, if they're not Korean and they ask me, I'm like, oh yeah, do this, do it like that,
Yeah.
Put shrimp in the kimchi. You have to put shrimp in it.
You absolutely have to. You're missing a whole flavor palette when you don't.
You have to put shrimp in it. Sorry.
That's right. And Margaret, I love that you can be funny even in the roughest times, and even personally in your life. I want to take it to a very real, upfront look at what you were going through when you decided to go put yourself through rehab and really be honest about your addiction. How has that been? And what advice do you have out there for some of our viewers who are dealing with addiction themselves?
Well, I think it's really hard to get sober because, well, right now, you don't want to be high right now because drugs are being expensive right now. I feel for you right now. If you're trying to buy some drugs right now, woo!
Inflation.
That would be really expensive right now. But I think, I actually am so grateful that I'm able to, because I was really in a very bad place, and I mean, it's amazing that I'm alive, and you can get to very destructive places, but I was in a very destructive place, and I think as Asians, we don't seek help. We're not a kind of culture that seeks outside help or interventions or mental health help or anything like that. And so to do that was a huge thing for me culturally. And to do that, like I felt like very like there was something wrong with me, but there was, and to deal with my mental health was really important. But I was so biased about it culturally. I had a real problem with it. But now that I have, life is a lot easier. And to deal with those cultural things, you think they don't affect you because it's like, I'm an American, but sometimes you don't realize the biases that you have until you investigate. So dealing with my mental health was really, really important. My depression was really important, and I'm so grateful to come out of it. So, sometimes those addictions and alcoholism have to do with depression, and they have to do with a lot of things that you're not looking at. And it's not a shameful thing. It's a very important thing.
Absolutely. I want to ask you a general question I hear, and I've also dealt with personally with my friends that are addicts. And what you hear is that an addict has to hit rock bottom in order to kind of come to that come to Jesus moment where you turn yourself in or you begin to take rehab seriously or whatnot. Do you agree with that? And if so or not, what was your rock bottom?
Well, I hit a bunch of different rock bottoms because I would hit so many different rock bottoms that I would like actually be digging because I would hit another bottom and then I'd be like, you know what, that's not bad enough. And I would just like keep on going because it was
give me an example though. Give me something to picture.
One time I was ODing outside of fancy. So I got divorced because my husband kept calling 911 because I would stop breathing. And those are expensive. They cost like $1,200. So I'm like, just give me a chance because I will start breathing. You call the ambulance too fast. And so, you know, I'm cheap. Koreans don't like to call 911.
Well, so most Asians wouldn't because we don't want to waste money.
I know. Like I would drive myself but I wasn't breathing. So I was with somebody else. But so I was at some fancy restaurant in Napa Valley, but I stopped breathing and I was ODing and they took me outside to the sidewalk and I was out on the sidewalk, but I could hear they had called the fire truck, but I could hear it even though I was ODing. I was passed out on the sidewalk. I got up and started running, but I was still ODing. But I was running, but I was blacked out.
You were having an out of body experience.
Yeah, it's weird to be coming to consciousness while running.
Right.
And I mean, that's amazing when you're like blacked out but running. So. Have to pay. I still outran the fire truck.
I can't with you.
So, I mean, but I didn't have to. It's $1,200. So that I was really glad.
Wow, and I'm glad that you're here alive to tell about it. You know, I mean, this is the number one thing.